Leafs trade talks are really starting to pick up as multiple new reports have dropped revealing Brad Treliving's trade plans ahead of the trade deadline. And over the next few weeks, things are really going to start to escalate, and new reports have dropped revealing some very interesting targets. So stay tuned for all that in this episode, as a couple of these targets have Leafs fans fired up. But before we get into it, if you're part of the 70% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable, and as we approach the trade deadline and as we approach the Four Nations Cup break here, when there's going to be a lot of trades going down, you're going to want to make sure to hit that subscribe button. This is the place to be for daily content. But Darius, the Leafs are in an interesting spot right now. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on surrounding, in the NHL in general about trades. You've had some videos on it here, and some new targets have been revealed, and a couple guys that we haven't spoken about, a lot of Leafs fans haven't spoken about too much. And let's dive right into it now. And you can see this report. We'll start with this. A trade like one the Dallas Stars made last week for Mikael Granlund and Ceci would be ideal for the Leafs. The Stars use a first-round pick and a conditional third to fill two needs in one move, adding a center up front and a depth piece on defense, exactly what the Leafs are looking for. The challenge for the Leafs, however, and the other buyers, is determining who's actually available. Dallas didn't wait for the market to take shape. They moved quickly on two sure things from a clear seller. We're going to dive into a couple targets here in a minute, but I want to get your thoughts on this first. Now, a lot of fans out there and a lot of NHL people in general were saying maybe it was a bit of an overpay on the Dallas Stars front in this trade. Now, something else to keep in mind is the Leafs don't own their 2025 first round pick. It was given up in the McCabe trade, so you can't compare apples directly here. That being said, it's certainly an interesting framework to follow, and the Dallas Stars made their team a lot better.
Yeah, and the Dallas Stars had a need in that point, right? Like they needed to make a trade like that, so it makes perfect sense on their end that maybe you could look at it like they overpaid, but they had to do that, and they had to do it early. For the Toronto Maple Leafs, because of where they are with the cap, I mean, the contracts change a little bit as the trade deadline gets closer. You're paying a little bit less. The cap hits are a little bit different. So I think Brad Treliving's going to wait a little bit still, although I think that the opposite is best for the team. I think that they actually should make a trade sooner rather than later instead of letting everyone else get taken already, because obviously there is some weird internal trade deadline that's happening this week and obviously right after the Four Nations face-off, as Elliot Friedman was talking about. So it could get a little crazy. There could be a lot of options that the Leafs could be looking at that are off the board. They're already off the board. Yanni Gourde doesn't look like that's very likely anymore. Could still be, but obviously he won't join the team till maybe almost May at this point, April or May, right? So that would be a tough pickup, but again, I think it's very interesting. I think Treliving's going to wait still a little while, but there's a lot of options that the Leafs could be interested in that are flying off the board already.
Yeah, it's getting very interesting. Let's talk about a couple of targets that are available. A couple of guys here who have emerged as potential fits for the Leafs in the fourth period's updated trade list. So a couple of these guys, this is from David Pagnotta. Now there's Donato and there's Alexiak, and a couple of these, we're going to start with Alexiak. Has a year remaining on his contract after this season, has a 16-team no trade list, giving him partial control over where he could be moved. The Leafs might see him as a strong candidate to bolster their blue line, targeting him as a top four defenseman with term, which could potentially provide stability for not just one playoff run, but two. That's why we obviously know Brad Treliving's going to be heavy in on the guys with term. That is a defenseman, and with the uncertainty of Hakanpää, a couple of things there, it could make sense. But also Donato, which we've covered a while ago now, is having a solid season by his standards. He's very cheap, and he could be an interesting bottom six option here. And this is the report, again, that came out. And if you kind of pair it with the fact that the Leafs had interest in Brandon Saad, you can kind of start to make some expectations yourself and kind of make some predictions on what the Leafs are actually going to be going for. And yeah, this report is from David Pagnotta. Very intriguing to me. I like the idea of Donato if he's very, very cheap. And Alexiak would be a bit of a bigger swing here for a team that I think I'd rather them make a big swing on the forward group.
Again, we have some conflicting reports to a degree. Obviously, Ryan Donato does not fit the description of anything we've heard so far, although he would be a cheap option if you go to the Chicago Blackhawks. And I think the Blackhawks are a very underrated trade partner for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They could be a really good trade partners together, but he would come cheaper for sure. He's a younger option, right? He's only like 28. He's not as old as some of the other guys we're talking about in their, mid 30s, mid to late 30s. So a cheaper option for sure. Plays center, can play that third line center position. So that would make sense in that way. And when you look at Jamie Alexiak, that makes the most sense. He's a big body. I know he's a left shot defenseman, but maybe he can play both sides. And maybe you want to bolster. Maybe you want a different option than Benoit. I don't know exactly what they're thinking on the left side. So, although I think Benoit has been good at times, but Alexiak, I think, is a better puck mover. So it could be an option in the playoffs. And so I think he's a very interesting option for Brad Treliving. This is a player Brad Treliving would want. I mean, if you look at his stats, again, he's not going to offer anything offensively, but he is a big body back there. He's 6'7", almost 260 pounds. So he's looking like a WWE superstar back there. I think that it would be a very interesting option for Brad Living and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I think this is a guy they're definitely looking at. Again, left shot defenseman. It's interesting, but he plays a lot of minutes. He plays the way that they need a guy like that in that role to play. So they just want to bolster, I think, either their top four or maybe just another guy on the left side there and maybe shift somebody over to the right side that is a right shot. Like we've seen McCabe, he can play the right side. So again, I don't think that they should split up Tanev and McCabe, but I think they're considering everything at this point. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, huge body. And we think about, Dreger obviously, mentioned Brendan Saad a little bit, which could have gave them a little bit of, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit of information surrounding what their plan could be. But speaking of Jamie Alexiak a little bit, you mentioned it. He is 6'7", 257, and what he would provide is some stability to the Leafs. Also, obviously, would be a huge body. We know Brad Living isn't afraid to bring in those physical defensemen. Think about their interest in Nikita Zadorov, both last trade deadline and this past off season. And yeah, when it comes to Alexiak in 50 games, you saw the stats there earlier. Now, let us know down below. Do you think, I think it would cost a lot given the fact that they still need forwards. When you're talking about Ryan Donato, now, the good thing about Alexiak, like I mentioned, is that he has another year in his contract. But for Ryan Donato, he would be a pending UFA. But I do think he would provide some very, critical value to the team, specifically in the bottom six. And obviously, look at his stats. He has 15 goals and 15 assists here in 50 games. He's only 28 years old. The big thing for his guy is that he is a pending UFA after this season. We've seen from Brad Treliving that he's looking for players that are under contract and have some term on a term like Jamie Alexiak. Whereas Donato, I honestly think he fits really well. The only problem is I don't think Brad Treliving is going to go very far out of his way necessarily to grab a rental, even though he is a younger guy and maybe they think that they can extend him. But him being a UFA, albeit the cap hit is extremely low and he could fit into the bottom six fairly well here. It's interesting because Alexiak's the better fit, but I think that they should have some higher aspirations for their forward group than Ryan Donato.
Yeah, Alexiak makes perfect sense, right? Big body. You can make the salary cap work if you want to. It might come at a higher price tag, but it just it fits. It would fit and it makes sense. And obviously you get another year in terms of term left on his contract. So that's exactly what they want. And that's exactly what fits. Donato doesn't fit the description we've been hearing the last 2 weeks whatsoever at this point, right? Like he's a rental. He would be a rental. Again, he comes at a cheaper price tag. He is younger, which is good. 28. I like that. They could re-sign him and I don't think it would come at a really high price tag or anything like that. And the salary cap's going up next year, but you have to consider Mitch Marner and all these external factors and stuff like that. So, it could be a very interesting option, but I do wonder what he looks like on the Leafs third line. 15 goals, 15 assists so far this season in 50 games for the Chicago Blackhawks, who are a terrible team. There's not much going on there and they have no real direction. So putting in a decent season, I wonder what he would look like at third line center for the Leafs. Again, I don't think this is a guy that can take the matchup game away from Matthews and Tavares, so it doesn't really fit the bill based on what we've heard. But I think, Treliving and co probably pivot every single day on what they can get and what they should use at the trade deadline, obviously, because there are options coming off the board already. JT Miller's gone, Mikael Granlund's gone, stuff like that. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I wonder what he looks like on the Leafs third line. I think he can add some scoring. He's decent defensively as well. He's a younger option. You can re-sign him, although he is a rental at this point. That's what I would label him. But an interesting prospect there to go out and get a guy like that. It doesn't really fit the bill too much, but could work, and it's a cheaper price tag. I don't think you're giving up too much in terms of assets either.
Yeah, fits the bill in the sense of he's a center, third line center, which is exactly what the Leafs are
Right.
supposedly going for. He almost has the production, 15, obviously different positions, 15 goals, 15 assists, that you're hoping to get something out of Nick Robertson in that regard and have a high scoring third liner. But Nick Robertson hasn't done that, so maybe they bring in Ryan Donato. Of course, Ryan Donato is a center, which will also be beneficial here. And I do think they move off of Nick Robertson. So I think Brad Treliving, if they move off Nick Robertson, would like to exchange some of that, in theory, Robertson's goal scoring ability, and Ryan Donato would be able to provide that. So let us know down below what your thoughts are on that. A ton of reports dropping, a ton of new news coming out. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.